Welcome to another cybersecurity outreach webinar. We're glad to have all of you come join us today. The goal of this webinar is to equip youths with with knowledge about emerging technologies in cybersecurity and information technology, to learn how to stay safe online, and to build a foundation for those who would like to take up a career in computer science and cybersecurity. Our topic for today is understanding PKI, and we have as our guest Mr. Adam Ross. Adam, it's nice to have you here.
It's my pleasure to join you today.
Yes, today, let us welcome with us kids from Excellent Kiddies Montessori Academy, Buare, Abuja. A lot of you joined me during the lockdown while we were having this seminar, and we felt it was right to come to your school and share some time with you. Really appreciate you, and thanks for staying back. Okay, so today we'll talk a little. Adam, we're going to start a little. I'll just try to introduce them to what cybersecurity, cryptography is. Then we'll come over to PKI. Would that be fine? Okay.
Yes, that sounds very good.
Yeah, good. So let me share my screen. So, as you all know, my name is Ame Udobon. So, we're going to talk about PKI, but before PKI, there was something called cryptography. Cryptography is the method of converting plain text to ciphertext. Okay, what I mean by ciphertext is unintelligent data, something that anyone cannot make sense of. And this was used a long time ago by Julius Caesar in 100 BC. Okay, what he was able to do, we now call it cipher, Caesar cipher. What it was like was that when Julius Caesar wanted to send messages to people at war, he would encode it in a way that no one can read it. Okay, and that's what happens today. When we want to send messages from point A to point B on a computer, okay, or using the internet, we encode it or we encrypt it. Okay, and when it gets to the other end, the person decrypts it. Okay, so before now, a lot of people, those that were using cryptography were usually the military. They used it a lot during the First and Second World War, and then big institutions and government organizations. But today, cryptography is used everywhere. How many of you here have a smartphone that has WhatsApp? Good. Now, when you use WhatsApp, you always notice that it says encrypted end to end. Yes, yes. And okay, then how many of you use Facebook? When you log to Facebook, you see that on top it is HTTPS, right? It's not just HTTP. What that means is that it is encrypted. Okay, so a lot of times, if things are not encrypted, people can see it in plain text. Take for example, you want to go on the internet to make a transaction with GT online banking, and you know you have to put in your details there, right? And when you put in your details and they are not encrypted, someone else can harvest it and use it. Do you understand? So because of that, that's why cryptography is very important. Modern technology today requires us to use cryptography or to encrypt things. Okay? So look at this food for thought here. It says cryptography. If it didn't exist, we would have invented it. Imagine, who can tell me what it would be like if everybody could have access to our email accounts or our banking information? Would it be secure? So this thing you do, that you just use your smartphone today to transfer money, it wouldn't have been possible if there was no cryptography. So what are the things we use cryptography for? We use cryptography to keep our secret. That's confidentiality. Okay? We also use it to protect ourselves online, like I've told you. And it's also used for integrity. I'll show you how to ensure that an information that is sent from one person to another is not changed. And if it's changed, you can tell that a change has occurred. As small as, if, for example, someone puts a semicolon or a comma on an information, it's changed immediately because of cryptography. We have a way of doing that. And it also gives you room for authorization. A lot of you, I don't know if you've ever tried to log into online and it will tell you to use that it will send a code to your phone and all of that. Yeah, that's OTP. But there are other times you would need to use a smart card or something to log in. Cryptography gives you that advantage. Then there's something we call non-repudiation. What non-repudiation means is that after you have done something, you cannot deny that you did it. Okay? You cannot deny that you did it. And with cryptography, we can achieve that. So, you see, because of the importance of cryptography, a lot of government, a lot of people spend time working hard to make the crypto system more secure, while a lot of government and state hackers or state-sponsored hackers spend time to, to do what we call cryptanalysis. What it means is that to break the cryptography, okay? So it is like a war, okay? And that's the world you are going into, a world where ours is even a lot better. When you merge into that world, a lot of things will change, and you have to be equipped. So that's why we're coming around, trying to take this time to tell you that these things are existing. Start planning and thinking and aiming to even achieve yours, because these things were designed by people like you and I. Okay, and you can someday do something or come up with a better form of cryptography. Is that okay? So there are different forms of cryptography. We have symmetric, we have asymmetric, sorry about this, and we have hashing. Okay, now for symmetric, you for symmetric cryptography, you use only one key. Okay, you use one key to encrypt and to decrypt. When I mean encrypt, what I'm trying to say is that you use it to make the plain text become ciphertext. Okay, then you use that same key to decrypt. That means to change a ciphertext into a plain text. Then for asymmetric, you use two keys. Okay, there's the public and the private key. You don't share your public key. I mean, you don't share your private key. You only share your public key, as the name is. So everyone has access to it. So if anyone encrypts with your public key, you are the only one that can decrypt that information. And if you encrypt with your private key, others can decrypt, knowing that the information actually came from you. Is that okay? And you also have another form which is called hashing. Hashing is a one-way function in that you can only convert any size of text into a fixed length of text, okay, or a fixed length of information. So you use it to ensure integrity, just the way I said earlier, so that no one can alter whatever information you have sent, or to prove beyond reasonable doubt that you are the one that sent out that information. So we're going to go back to Alex. So Alex, hello Alex.
Hello.
Yes, so Alex, I've done a little introduction, and I would like us to start with this question. Alex, what is PKI and what are the components of PKI?
So PKI is what you refer to as a public key infrastructure. And as you mentioned, when you're using asymmetric encryption, that there are two components to the way that a message is encrypted or decrypted. One is consisting of a public key, which is shared, and by virtue of the fact that it is public, is free to and available to anyone who participates inside the PKI. The other component of that is the private key, and this is something that is unique and specific to the individual. So these two components, when combined and signed by a certificate authority, represent what's called a digital certificate. And to put it into kind of plain terms and give a real world example, imagine that you are living in a high-rise apartment building and there's 100 apartments there. Everyone has one key that opens the front door to the apartments and allows them inside the building and access to the shared public spaces. But that same key that opens the front door to the apartment high-rise does not open the door to your individual apartment. So every person has both a public key, which allows them to come inside the building, and they have a private key, which allows them into their shared private space inside their own apartment. And this is very similar to how public key infrastructures work. The whole apartment building would be represented by the PKI infrastructure. The private key that unlocks the front door, the public key that unlocks the front door is something that you can share with everyone who lives there. So anyone can come and open that if they live inside that building. And then finally, their private key unlocks only the door to their apartment. Now, imagine that there is some sort of building superintendent or some person who is leasing the space. They are the ones who are responsible for giving out the keys. And this is what we would refer to as a certificate authority. The certificate authority is the person who is signing the public part of the public key so that we know that these people can actually live inside the building, because only the 100 people who have apartments there should be allowed inside without some type of prior access. So the certificate authority is the one that everyone trusts to say, yes, this person should have a public key, and they're also the ones that are responsible for managing the private keys of all of the sort of apartment livers. So does that make sense in terms of relating a sort of abstract concept of public keys to something that's kind of real world and what you might see in everyday life?
Yes, that makes sense. What he's saying is that there's a public key and there's a private key. Okay? The public key is what everyone has access to in a PKI. So it's like called public key infrastructure. That's what PKI means. Public key infrastructure. Okay? So, and everyone has access to the public key, and only you have access to the private key. Okay? It's just like an apartment building where everyone has access to the main front door, but inside your own rooms, you are the ones that have access to that. Okay? And then there's another person that signs off on that public key so that that can be trusted, and it's called the certificate authority. Okay? So, okay, it's not him, it's here. I have. It's the one. Yes. Okay, the next question, can you mention use cases of PKI?
Yes, certainly. There's quite a lot of things that you can do with public key infrastructures. And you pointed out that there are 4 primary ones, i.e. they are, I use this little memory device to help me remember them. So there's 4 of them, so there's 4 letters, and I use the word pain to say, hey, sometimes it's a pain to do this stuff with PKI, because P stands for privacy. This is the first and foremost reason why you would want to use some type of encryption, so that you can keep your messages private and secure. The A mentions comes from authorization, or for the attestation of the data. So this means that the people who you want to sort of join your apartment building, so to speak, are authorized to be there, and that they're the actual proper people that have the right access. The I stands for integrity. The integrity means that the data can't be changed or altered by fraudsters. So for example, if I wanted to place an order with someone online, I might send them a purchase order ordering 1,000 pieces of whatever I'm buying. But a fraudster might say, hey, I want to make this order much bigger. And they might try to add a 0 and say, hey, instead of ordering 1,000 pieces, I try to make it 10,000 pieces and make them pay 10 times as much. By using this type of public key infrastructure and encryption, we can prevent that any type of data is altered, and therefore we can maintain the integrity of data. And finally, the N stands for non-repudiation. And what that means is it's a more legal term to be able to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that the person that sent this message, or the message that they're actually sending, came from them and it originated from this particular person. So it can't be saying, oh, well, some fraudster was sitting at my computer and they were the one that sent that message and it wasn't really me. By using PKI, the combination of your private key and secure access to it via means of a PIN or a fingerprint, it proves that you're in possession of your private key and that you're the one who has sole control over it. So again, the 4 primary use cases are P for privacy, A for assurance or authorization, I for integrity, and N for non-repudiation. So you can kind of put those 4 concepts to use in everyday life, and you can see things like Ami mentioned. If you're using WhatsApp, you're using encryption to make sure that your messages are private and that they can't be read by other people who are not the intended recipient. So that means, since it's end-to-end encrypted, that only you, the sender, and B, the person you're sending it to, can read that message. So even if Mark Zuckerberg at Facebook wanted to read your messages, because they're encrypted, you have that privacy and they wouldn't be able to do that. Other types of use cases that you see, she mentioned, like in a web browser, when you're going to a site online, like you want to search something on Google, you don't necessarily want to go to some fake site that might be giving you some bad search results. So by having a sort of web certificate that encrypts the data, it also proves that it's coming from the legitimate source and they're actually going to the Google site. Another thing that public key infrastructures are often used is to do something called digital signature. How many of you have ever signed a contract where you put a pen on an ink and you write your name on a contract? Have any of you signed one of those yet? Something you've seen maybe your parents do?
So how many of you had signed any certificate or anything? That it's very important that that certificate is only signed by only you. Anybody else? Okay.
All right. Yeah, so this idea of replicating a physical ink signature, where I might physically see you sign something on a piece of paper and I can see, oh, this person who I know and trust is writing this signature. You can't necessarily do that online when you might be separated by time and space. You know, for example, if I were to write something and sign it here in Amsterdam, no one would really be able to know it was me that was signing this paper. So by combining this concept of a digital signature, which uses a certificate coming from a certificate authority who basically says, this person I know and this person I trust, by establishing this sort of identity assurance, we're also able to say that, yes, we can validate that this digital signature came from this person, and it includes things like a timestamp and other information that are actually much better than a physical ink signature. So the idea that you would be able to use something like your ID card or use an employee badge to digitally sign a document is really quite a great way to improve everyday life, because you can move to the sort of digitalization of these physical processes.
So what about remote network, like talking to you right now and working from home?
Sure. So this is actually a really great way. And in fact, we're using a lot of aspects of PKI right now, even though we might not realize it. So here, the Zoom client that we're connected to has a few things where we're using encryption so that it can't necessarily be having anyone necessarily join the meeting without having a prior permission. So what you've done is you've shared the meeting ID and you've shared the passcode. And this is very similar to using something like that Caesar cipher that you had talked about, because it represents a very simple type of access control. So anyone that you've given the meeting ID and you've given this passcode are able to join the meeting, but people who don't have that are kept out. So the fact that you've shared the meeting ID and passcode, this is like using a symmetric type of key in order to basically enable access and authorization to this. So we see that our conversation that we're having right now, it's private. Only the people who have this key can see it. I mean, there could be thousands of people or literally millions of people having Zoom meetings right now online, but only our access is provided by these sort of things. So we have a private meeting. You can tell that you're dealing with me because you can physically see me. And in that, I have some credential given to me from the sort of person, i.e. the passcode, that enables us to join. So it gives us privacy, it gives us integrity of the data, and basically it allows us to kind of all join in a secure manner.
Okay, I want you to give me try to explain what a certificate authority is again, please, and also give us examples of recognized certificate authorities. And do we have any here in Nigeria?
Yeah, sure. I can kind of do another example of kind of equating an IT concept to a real world concept. How many of you have plans to go to university?
How many of you have plans to go to a university?
All right, good. I see we have some people out there that want to go to university. Primarily, the reason why you want to go to university is to learn things. And the way that the university proves that you've learned things is by giving you a diploma, right? You hang it up in your office and it says, hey, I've got this seal on here that comes from this university that says I learned my accounting trade. And from that, it's signed. And you can see that this person who has this diploma has proven to themselves or proven to others that they're good at accounting. Or if they go to a law school, they could be good at law. Right? So you guys are understanding the concept of a diploma, sure? Well, having a digital certificate is very similar to that, except it's done online. So instead of going to a physical university, if I want to prove who I am, I go to a certificate authority. And the certificate authority, they're responsible for basically ensuring that I am who I claim to be. So the way that they would do this would be they would ask me for things like a birth certificate, or they would ask for some proof of registration. Maybe I've gone to NIMSI and have an ID card. You know, these are the things that I would use to actually prove my identity to a certificate authority. So is everyone kind of understanding that concept, that we use this digital like diploma to prove who we are online?
Okay, is that saying if you understand the concept of certificate authority, that means a university is assuring everyone that you pass through it. That you understand that by giving you a diploma or a certificate, as we call it here, right? Okay, good.
Okay, good. So like you have universities in Nigeria, there are also certificate authorities. And I mentioned that NIMSI, the National Identity Management Commission, is one of these CAs. They are responsible for enrolling you and creating the process of what they call identity vetting. When you vet someone's identity, you go and you actually try to prove who they are, and that you try to make them say, hey, that yes, I actually am Adam Ross, yes, I was actually born on this date in this town and such. So we do this by having lots of different ways to actually prove who we are. So primarily, when you're born, hopefully if you were born at a hospital, you get some type of birth certificate that says, hey, your parents gave birth to this live daughter, and her name is Ame, and she was born on this date. So that's typically one piece of information that you would use in order to prove your identity. Something else that you might use is some other type of known identifier. For example, if I want to get a bank account in Nigeria, I say, okay, I need to register my bank number, my bank account number. So this is one of the other things that represents part of my identity. And when we combine all these things like name, date of birth, location of birth, some known information, a banking number, maybe I also have a tax number for the Inland Revenue Service. All of these things together represent some kind of identity. And once I've proven that to a certificate authority, they then give me a digital certificate. And this digital certificate proves who I am and that I can be trusted and that my identity is assured to anyone who trusts this certificate authority. So as I mentioned, NIMC, the National Identity Management Commission, they're responsible for basically giving you a unique number when you register. And with this number, you're able to prove to anyone that who you are that you claim to be. So you identify yourself once, NIMC goes through this process to prove who you are. And then once you do that, you have this number and sometimes an ID card that enables you to prove who you are to anyone else in Nigeria. So do you guys understand that idea? Are you still there? Can you hear me? I seem to have lost your video.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you again. Yeah,
Okay,
yes.
good. I'm just trying to show them my identity card,
Okay.
my old one. So this is my ID card. Okay. On this, you have the public and the private keys. In Nigeria, we already have it set up, and the CA or the root CA is an NC. So it is signed, and with this, I can sign a document. I can prove that this is my identity. It has my biometrics, and all of them. It's protected here. Okay, and this is what PKI can do. Do we get that? Okay.
Yeah, not only does it have the certificates about you, but that ID card also has different types of certificates on there that prove that that ID card is coming from a proper agency, that it's a real one that's issued from NIMC. It's also proven that you didn't change things on there like your birth date or to try to look older or younger. I know women like to lie about their age so that they are appearing much younger. But sometimes people try to pretend that they're older so that they can receive a pension at an early age. Or sometimes people try to represent themselves as maybe their brother who has access to insurance or some type of subsidy. So by having these certificates that go on the card, it means that fraudsters can't try to alter that data. They can't try to change it, and they can't try to manipulate it so that they're eligible to claim something that they wouldn't be getting normally. So not only does it have information about you, but the ID card also has digital certificates that prove the validity and the authenticity of the actual card itself.
Okay. Thank you, Adam. I also want to find out something from you. You mentioned digital signature, and then in your last seminar, you also mentioned something called digital seals. What is that?
Okay, these are two kind of very similar devices, but they are the difference between a natural person and a legal entity. So does anyone have parents that own their own company?
You said?
I said, does anyone out there have parents or maybe even themselves have their own company? Yeah, okay. So on one hand, maybe your father who has his own business as a constructor, you know, he's got his name as the Sunday, so he's got construction. He can digitally sign a document as himself, Sunday Ofology. But what happens when he needs to sign something on behalf of his company? For example, he's saying, yes, I want to place an order from Ofology Construction to this guy to buy a bunch of steel supplies for building a house. So what he does there is he might sign something on behalf of his company. So him in the role of the owner of the company signs it as the company itself. So Ofology Construction. So on one hand, he has the opportunity to digitally sign something as himself, as me, the person, as Sunday, or he can put a seal on a document saying, yes, that as my company, as Ofology Construction, I want to place this order. So it has to deal with the difference between a digital signature from an individual or what's called a natural person or an organization, a legal entity. Do you guys understand that difference?
Yes, yes. Okay, thank you so much. Adam, what happens if a certificate is compromised?
Yeah. Well, that's a very good question because sometimes, you know, you might lose your ID card. Has anyone ever lost their keys before to get in the house? You know, sometimes it can be a very difficult process when you're locked out. Well, the notion of having a digital certificate and having a certificate authority, which is able to grant us new copies of this key or new certificates, it makes it much easier to deal with. So just like in real life, if you lost your keys, you might be able to go to your, you know, your brother or someone else who has the same copy of your key, and you could go to a locksmith and you could get a replacement key made, right? Because you can make an actual copy of that key. The same is true in a PKI. If I have an authorized request, I can get a new key or a new digital certificate that contains that key information made. So I can make an exact copy of the existing key that I would have. But sometimes bad things happen and you might have a real difficult situation. For example, you might have a run-in with some criminals and they might steal your wallet. And there they take your cash, but they might also take your ID card. In that case, you don't want them to be able to impersonate you by using your ID online. So the card itself has several ways to restrict that, namely the use of your biometrics, i.e. their fingerprints wouldn't match your fingerprint, but they might actually force you to like say, hey, tell us your PIN. And if you give them your PIN, so they have the combination of your PIN and your card and your wallet, this would be very bad because it could mean that they would normally be able to impersonate you. But thankfully, with public key infrastructures, you're actually able to do something to revoke that key. And you can say, hey, look, you tell the police or tell, in this case, NIMSI, that your wallet was stolen, your ID card is lost. And in that case, they can revoke access so that even if the criminals tried to use your PIN, it would be recognized as invalid. So there are some really great ways to both give you the convenience of making a copy of a key when it's allowed or when it's safe to do so. But with the use of PKI, it also gives you the ability to completely revoke keys, cancel them out, and prevent them from ever being used again.
Sorry, Adam. Sorry about that. Okay, sorry about that. Adam, can you show us, is it possible for you to show us how to create both a private and a public key?
Well, yes and no. So I can talk a bit about it and maybe show you one example, but it's not necessarily the real world example.
Okay.
So let's first talk about the kind of real world example that you showed already. You showed the class there, the copy of your ID card, your electronic ID card. So I don't know if you can see it now, but inside that card, there's an actual very small microprocessor. And inside that, there's a chip. And inside that chip, there's an area where they call basically the secure element. So inside your ID card, there's a very special place where we're able to store information in an extreme secure fashion. So this is what makes a smart card or an electronic ID card basically a smart document, is the fact that it has a means to put this private data, in this case, the private key, onto the secure element inside your ID card. In the real world, there are special types of, I would say, security hardware called hardware security modules. And what they do are they're responsible for generating keys and then basically putting them onto the card, because this is much more practical to do in bulk. When you're doing this, it enables you to generate a private key of sufficient length, and that is basically able to keep the sort of cryptography behind it secure for a number of years. So as we start to see computing power grow, these keys need to be longer and longer to maintain their resistance to some type of hacker attacks. So typically, like with these ID cards, you have very specialized machines which are generating these keys in a secure fashion. And at the time the card is produced, it requests one of those keys from a pool and then imports it onto the key. And then it's all secured in that fashion. There are other ways to generate keys that actually are done by the chip themselves. And we can do this and access it via the use of like a small client interface. So in order to do that, you need a tool called a middleware. A middleware is like a driver for helping your computer system understand a smart card or your ID card. Let me see. I can't share my screen, unfortunately, but maybe I can explain the concept, or I don't know. Ami, is it possible for you to enable me to share my screen?
No, please share your screen. Go ahead.
I can't. It says the host disabled participant screen sharing.
Okay, let me do it. Okay, you try now.
No, it's still not good.
Can you now?
Let's try again. No, still, unfortunately. I think because it shows me as participant that I don't have that presenter right. Let's see. Yes, okay. Now I can.
Can you do that? Okay,
Yes.
good.
Okay, so I think you should be seeing my screen now.
Yes, we are.
Okay, great. So here, what this little white box is it shows you a list of basically all of the smart card readers that are attached to my device. So I've got here my virtual smart card, which is built into my laptop. And I also have two other smart card readers for ID cards or such. But if I wanted to create a new type of encryption algorithm or see what's actually supported. So in this case, I mentioned that as computers get stronger and stronger, we need larger key pairs. So in this case, I'll use what's called an RSA algorithm, which is like this sort of standard. And we'll use a key length of 2048 bits. This is what's referred to as a 2K key. This is the same key length that's used on the NIMC ID card. And it's basically resistant for around about 5 years with current cryptographic strength. So I can go ahead and I can generate this key, and it will now create a new key here. So you can see this is the new one that was done, and I've got a white key and a green key. Can anyone give me a guess as to what those are? What do you think the white key is?
Okay, say it out. Raise it. He wants to hear you. Public and private. Okay, he said
Yes, the white
public.
key, that's correct. The white key is the public part of the certificate or the key, and the green key is the private key. So what's the next step in order to get my key into something that's a bit more useful? Well, what I would want to do is I would want to potentially get a certificate. So can you see the difference here now? My screen is this one here just shows two keys, but this one shows a red icon that looks like a diploma. Well, that's actually a digital certificate. So let's take a look at see exactly what this certificate is. So if I show this, it doesn't really look like much, but what this does is it contains all the information about me and the certificate authority that enables it to be trusted on the web. So in this case, the issuer of this is coming from a certificate authority that's operated in Germany called dtrust. Dtrust is the federal German public certificate authority. They're basically the ones who issue the passport, the ID card, but they're also issuing PKI certificates to enterprise and private users. So in this case, they're giving me this. Looking at it, it shows the subject. And what does this have? Well, it tells some information about it. If we start from the end of the certificate and what's called a type full name, it has a container. And this container here is DG. Can anyone guess what this, I'm sorry, what this DE stands for?
Germany, the country.
That's right. DE is the top level 2-letter country code for Germany. If we were to look at your certificate that's on your ID card, it would show NG instead for Nigeria. So the next bit here is the O. The O stands for organization. And here in this case, you can see the legal name of my company, CV Cryptovision GmbH. So that shows it's like an incorporated company with the name of Cryptovision. Below that organization, I then have some information about me. The container name is myself, Adam Ross. Below that, it has some other information, the city where it was registered, and then my type full name, Adam Ross, the serial number of the certificate, and finally it has Nordrhein-Westfalen, which is like the province of Germany in which the company is. So after
Okay,
that,
Adam,
it has some.
Adam,
Yes.
please let me find out from those online if anyone has a question.
Sure.
Do you have a question? Do you understand what Adam is doing? Hello? Does anyone want to ask a question? No. Okay. Yes, no question. Okay,
Okay.
Adam, you can go ahead.
All right. So in addition to the subject of the certificate, it also has some information. So it says, hey, here's the validity date. So this certificate was issued on May 18th, 2020, and is good until May 22nd of 2022. So for 2 years, I'm able to identify myself with this digital certificate. So here it shows some different types of what's called key usage. And this is a little bit of information about what the types of things I can do with the key. So in this case, this certificate allows me to do encryption. So with this, I can use it to encrypt an email or encrypt a file. I can also show you a certificate that's used for a bit different one. This one is so this one is used for digital signature. So in this case, I have two certificates on there for two different types of jobs, but they both enable me to use encryption as part of the PKI. The certificate also contains information about the types of signing algorithms that were used, and it shows information about the actual fingerprint, and it will actually show the actual certificate data itself. At the beginning of the presentation, Ami talked a bit about things like message digest or hashing algorithms. What these are there easy ways to sum up the whole certificate into a function that can be basically a one-way extracted. So with just this fingerprint, I'm able to identify the certificate, and I can see that if the fingerprint matches the certificate, that it hasn't been altered or manipulated. And so by using these secure hashing algorithms or these message digest functions, I can sum up the certificate and verify it quite quickly and easily through a simple type of easy math calculation, basically. So here we show this combination of a certificate, which is the actual public key that's signed by the certificate authority, and that basically enables trust from anyone who is able to I share this public key, this public part of the certificate with.
Thank you so much, Adams.
Yeah.
I can see something here called secret key.
Yes. So this secret keys is the container on my smart card that contains all of the combination of these public and private key pairs and the digital certificate that goes with it. So as you can see under,
When can
what was that?
Adam,
Yes.
when my certificate is revoked for any reason, where what can I do to get a new one, or where? And that's the first question. What can I do to get a new one? Or how can a third party know that that certificate has been revoked and should not be used?
Sure. So the first thing that you would do when you need to get a new certificate or a new key would be to call what's called the registration authority. The registration authority is part of the certificate authority that is responsible for kind of doing your initial identity checking and making sure who you are, who you claim to be. But they're also the agency which is responsible for ensuring that if there was something that happened to you or your ID card or your digital certificate, that it gets taken care of. So if we go back to the example of someone stole my wallet and they have my ID card, the first thing that I would do is I would call NIMSI and say, hey, or in this case, I'd call the police first and say, hey, I've been robbed. Let's go catch these criminals. But after I do that, I'd say, hey, until you catch the criminals, let's make sure that they can't do anything with my ID card. And that's when I would call NIMSI. When they would do that, they would, of course, say, oh, we're very sorry to hear that you were robbed. Let's make sure that the card is no longer valid or useful. So what they can do is they can go through and they can revoke the certificates that were on that card. And the way that they would do this is two things. Once something is known as compromised, they would publish it to what's called a certificate revocation list. This is basically a huge list of all of the cards or certificates that have been compromised get to be very large, and that there might be, you know, thousands or maybe even millions of certificates that are no good anymore. And so there's a different way to check this, and this is what they call online certificate status protocol. And what this does is it enables me to do a small check and say, hey, I want to query a database online, and I want to know, is this certificate valid right now or not? And so by doing this very simple, lightweight query of, is this certificate good or not, we're able to get a response instantly to say, no, that certificate has been revoked, or no, it's not trusted, or yes, it's still valid.
Thank you so much, Alex. We've really learned a lot today. And as it is, we're running out of time. So we would like to go into another practical session where I'll show those that are here how to encrypt and decrypt using Open SSL. I'll also show them how to hash and what happens when a message is altered and it's and you rehash it to see the comparison. Adam, we're really very grateful. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope when we call again, you'll be willing to come in and help us. Thank you so much for being here.
You're very welcome. It was my pleasure to share with you a little bit of information about PKI. I hope that you found it informative, and I hope that you are understanding a little bit more about what you can do with encryption and digital certificates in the future.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So for those of you that are joining us online, we want to say thank you for joining us. We'll go straight to a practical session here, and the webinar for today is ended. It's already 3 o'clock, but we need to stay back and finish some practical things here. I want to say thank you for being with us. God bless you. Bye-bye.